Nelson.
Thank you, Mr President. And I appreciate the two contributions already. I'll just add mine to that. It'll follow on nicely, I think, from the member for Hobart. Mr President, I'll be supporting this bill. The bill will set the groundwork for the Tasmanian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, TASCAT, establishing a shared location as well as shared objectives and an agreed structure for the 9 boards and tribunals coming together under the one roof. As we've heard, the bill is the first legislative step in establishing TASCAT. It's taken a dedicated effort over many years to come to fruition, and I congratulate the government and the staff from the Department of Justice, both past and present, for their work on this bill. Other jurisdictions, as we've heard, have successfully amalgamated their tribunals in such a way, and it is certainly appropriate and timely for Tasmania to be following suit, and we are fortunate to be able to draw on and learn from the experience and the lessons from other states. The creation of TASCAT may lead to efficiencies and eventually cost savings through the resource and service sharing aspects of the amalgamation, although cost savings are often an aim at the beginning and often don't necessarily eventuate over the longer term. However, we can remain optimistic on that front. There will be greater administrative support for the tribunals through this model. There will be a benefit in staff being able to move across jurisdictions in line with workload and ebbs and flows. Staff may also, through this model, have access to greater career development opportunities and benefit from sharing skills and expertise with a larger cohort. There may also be scope for specialised corporate services such as HR and IT, freeing up senior managers to exercise their primary roles. So I see this as potentially a very fruitful model to take us forward. Certainly being able to share technology, including data collection and reporting, will enable TASCAT to invest in more tailored and compatible technological solutions that will improve overall service delivery. That's particularly beneficial, I believe, for the smaller tribunals that perhaps previously didn't have the scale or resources to justify the type of investment that might be needed in that sort of technological way forward. My expectation would be that the government would commit to the idea that any savings that may be eventually made could in fact be reinvested into TASCAT so that they can continue to improve the services that they provide and the ways that they provide those services to the community. Mr President, I understand that the new premises incorporate a number of easy access features, and I'm particularly happy that the TASCAT building in Barrack Street has been designed with the specific needs of clients in mind. Old buildings with steps and tight doorways can be an obstacle for some people in accessing government services, and many of us know that all too well. I'm pleased to hear that the TASCAT building has been fitted out for easy access by all clients, be they people with a disability, the elderly, people pushing a pram, or any other sorts of challenges that people may face around accessibility. A disability access bathroom and toilet area is a welcome addition, and one that we can not necessarily take for granted in all circumstances. Modern technologies, including things like hearing loops and the public interface facilities, along with upgraded audio, visual and recording facilities, are also very welcome additions. I understand that there'll be a mix of large hearing rooms, mediation rooms, smaller one-on-one rooms in the office, and I think that's a really appropriate way to cater for the needs that are there within the activities of the various tribunals. There are important details to accommodate different circumstances in this way, because discrimination, and certainly indirect discrimination, can come in many forms. Not being able to access a building, or being unable to hear or see what is happening, or not having access to quiet, low sensory space for meetings are all potentially forms of indirect or avoidable discrimination. Mr President, having 9 tribunals in the same building, sharing staff knowledge and working with aligned technologies should make it easier for clients to access the range of services that they need and reduce the duplication of effort by each tribunal involved. And I think that holding the clients and their experience at the centre of that is quite important, and it looks to me that this could deliver a better outcome. I acknowledge that there's benefits to information sharing in most circumstances, many. However, as the member for Hobart has already spoken about, I also had noted a concern on this front. And I also would like assurances from the government that there will be adequate protections in place to protect client privacy and avoid any preconceived bias. I think that ties in.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yes, because we all know, Mr. President.
You just describe it better than I do, that's all.
Well, we all know of instances where potentially a constituent gets labelled difficult or vexatious or by a particular department, and this label can then follow them. And that's perhaps an unfair outcome. It certainly can impede their access to justice if that label then changes the way they're treated. So this is something that I put to the government to consider carefully and to guard against, particularly given the vulnerability of many of the people that are requiring the services of these tribunals. I trust that every jurisdiction within TASCAT will treat each person and issue on its own merits and their own merits, and will have firm practices in place to actively support that to happen. I think it's also important to highlight the need for each tribunal to continue to include specialist members and undertake specialised actions as currently required under each relevant piece of legislation. I understand that the legislative requirements of the individual tribunals will remain, because I think it's very clear that amalgamation doesn't necessarily have to mean homogenisation or generalisation.
Well, that's the problem.
As the member for Hobart has already spoken about, I agree that there are risks involved in that, and they need to be not just noted, they need to be actively guarded against or worked to overcome in this early stage of things. Mr. President, I'm pleased to see that the people and service focus in Clause 10 of this bill, the main objectives of the tribunal. Clause 10 states that TASCAT is to, and I quote, promote the best principles of public administration, and including independence in decision-making, natural justice and fairness, high quality and consistent decision-making, and transparency and accountability in its performance. It also sets out easy access objectives for the tribunal. Clause 10(1)(b) states that tribunals are to be accessible by being easy to find and easy to access, and to be responsive to parties, especially people with greater needs for assistance than others. It goes on then to specify that applications, referrals and appeals should be processed and resolved quickly, justly and at the lowest appropriate cost, using the most appropriate resolution procedures available. It stipulates that straightforward language and procedures are to be used, and that tribunals are to act flexibly, informally and generally rather than technically wherever possible. Finally, it requires that the tribunal consult with agencies, organisations and other bodies when dealing with matters as appropriate. I think all of these things are strong and worthy goals and good stated objectives to have there. They certainly put people and the vulnerable people that will be often involved here at the centre of consideration, and I applaud that. I think these objectives should certainly be embedded quite actively into every aspect of the tribunal's operations, from the initial contact in person, online or via the phone, through the constructions of tools such as forms and web services and documents, through to staff training, strategic planning and, most importantly, client management processes. I'm interested to know from the government how those objectives that are very admirable are going to be monitored and measured by TASCAT. How will TASCAT implement, monitor and review its performance against those objectives? Is there or will there be a formal mechanism for this to occur, and if so, what would it include? How will we know? How will we be able to say to ourselves, yes, TASCAT is meeting those objectives, and we can be reassured and confident that clients are indeed getting the best possible service and access and outcomes that they deserve? In particular, I'd like to see the public given the opportunity to provide feedback, both the public that has used the services and others who, for whatever reason, have been perhaps excluded or not able to access the tribunal system. To ensure such feedback would ensure that services really are understanding the extent to which and how successfully they're meeting the important standards that are articulated, and through that the needs of the clients that come to be involved. And then that way too we as a community can be assured that the Tribunal is well serving the community broadly. Mr President, the bill establishes TASCAT, and it is a necessary and progressive first step towards the formal transfer of powers and staff to the new body. The amalgamation of tribunals promises many benefits potentially to the community, to the tribunal officers themselves and staff. And as the Australian Lawyers Alliance stated in its submission to this process a while back, amalgamation of tribunals, I quote, promises to achieve greater access to justice for disadvantaged people facing a range of civil issues, including discrimination, dust diseases, guardianship and administration issues, mental health and residential tenancy disputes. And I pick out on that access to justice, and in particular for those disadvantaged people in our community. Mr President, this solid and people-focused bill will form a strong base for the next important legislative stages, which will follow to expand TASCAT's jurisdiction. And I support the bill.
The question is that the bill be now read the second time. The honourable member for Windermere.
Yes, thank you, Mr President, and I'll be quite